Hello, I'm Crimson Clover, and welcome back to Clover Reads. Today I'll be reading some stories from the book The Sandman's Hour, Stories for Bedtime, by Abby Phillips Walker, found on Project Gutenberg site. First story, Where the Sparks Go. One night, when the wind was blowing and it was clear and cold out of doors, a cat and a dog who were very good friends sat dozing before a fireplace. The wood was snapping and crackling, making the sparks fly. Some flew up the chimney, others settled into the coals in the bed of the fireplace, while others flew out of the hearth and slowly closed their eyes and went to sleep. One spark ventured further out upon the hearth and fell very near Pussy. This made her jump, which awakened the dog. "That almost scorched your fur coat, Miss Pussy," said the dog. "No, indeed," answered the cat. "I am far too quick to be caught by those silly sparks." "Why do you call them silly?" asked the dog. "I think them very good to look at, and they help to keep us warm." "Yes, that is all true," said the cat. "But those that fly up the chimney on a night like this certainly are silly, when they could be warm and comfortable inside. For my part, I cannot see why they fly up the chimney." The spark that flew so near Pussy was still winking, and she blazed up a little when she heard the remark the cat made. "If you knew our reasons, you would not call us silly," she said. "You cannot see what we do. But if you were to look up the chimney and see what happens if we are unfortunate enough to get up at the top, you would not call us silly." The cat and dog are very curious to know what happened, but the spark told them to look and see for themselves. Pussy was very cautious and told the dog to look first, so he stepped boldly up to the fireplace and thrust his head in. He quickly withdrew it, for his hair was singed, which made him cry and run to the other side of the room. Miss Pussy smoothed out her soft coat and was very glad she had been so wise. She walked over to the dog and urged him to come near the fire, but he realized why a burnt child dreads the fire, and remained a safe distance. Pussy walked back to the spark and continued to question it. "We cannot go into the fire," she said. "Now, pretty bright spark, do tell us what becomes of you when you fly up the chimney. I am sure you only become soot, and that cannot make you long to get up to the top." "Oh, you are very wrong," said the spark. "We are far from being black when we fly up the chimney. For once we reach the top, we live forever, sparkling in the sky. You can see us if you look up the chimney, all our brothers and sisters who have been lucky and reached the top, winking at us almost every night. Sometimes the wind blows them away, I suppose, for there are nights when we cannot see the sparks shine." "Who told you all that?" said the cat. "Did any of the sparks ever come back to tell you they could live forever?" "Oh no," said the spark, "but we can see them, can we not? And of course, we all want to shine forever." "I said you were silly," said the cat, "and now I know it. Those are not sparks you see, they are stars in the sky." "You can call them anything you like," replied the spark, "but we make the bright light, you see." "Well, if you take my advice," said the cat, "you will stay right by the fireplace, for once you reach the top of the chimney, out of sight you go. The stars you are twinkling far above the chimney, and you never could reach them." But the spark would not be convinced. Just then, someone opened a door, and a draught blew the spark back into the fireplace. In a few minutes it was flying with the others toward the top of the chimney. Pussy watched the fire for a minute, and then looked at the dog. "The spark may be right after all," said the dog. "Let us go out and see if we can see it." Pussy stretched herself and blinked. "Perhaps it is true," she replied. "Anyway, I will go with you and look." What a silly little spark. Story 2, The Good Sea Monster. On an island of rocks out in the ocean lived a sea monster. His head was large, and when he opened his mouth it looked like a cave. It had been said that he was so huge he could swallow a ship, and that on stormy nights he sat on the rocks and the flashing of his eyes could be seen for miles around. The sailors spoke of him with fear and trembling, but as you can see, the sea monster had been a friend to them, showing them the rock in the storm by flashing his eyes. But because he looked so hideous, all who beheld him thought he must be a cruel monster. One night, there was a terrible storm, and the monster went out into the ocean to see if any ship was wrecked in the night, and if possible, help any who was floating about. He found one little boy floating about on a plank. His name was Coco, and when he saw the monster he was afraid. But when Coco saw the monster did not attempt to harm him, he climbed on the monster's back, and he took him to the rocky island. Then the monster went back into the sea, and Coco wondered if he were to be left alone. But after a while the monster returned and opened his mouth very wide. Coco ran when he saw the huge mouth, for he thought the monster intended to swallow him, But as he did not follow him, Coco went back. The monster opened his mouth again, and Coco asked, "Do you want me to go inside?" And the monster nodded his head. "It must be for my own good," said Coco, "for he could easily swallow me if he wished, without wanting me to walk in." So Coco walked into the big mouth and down a dark passage, but what the monster wanted him to do he could not think. He could see very faintly now, and after a while he saw a stove, a chair, and a table. "I will take these out," said Coco, "for I am sure I can use them." He took them to the cave on the island, and when he returned the monster was gone, but he soon returned and again he opened his mouth. Coco walked in this time without waiting, and he found boxes and barrels of food which he stored away in the cave. When Coco had removed everything, the monster lay down and went to sleep. Coco cooked his dinner, and then he awoke the monster and said, "Dinner's ready." But the monster shook his head and plunged into the ocean. He soon returned with a mouthful of fish. Then Coco knew that the monster had bought all the things from the sunken ship for him, and he began to wish that the monster could talk, for he no longer feared him. "I wish you could talk," he said. "I can," the monster replied. "No one ever wished it before. An old witch changed me into a monster and put me on this island, where no one could reach me, and the only way I can be restored to my original form is for someone to wish it." "I wish it," said Coco. "You have had your wish," said the monster, "and I can talk. But for me to become a man, someone else must wish it." The monster and Coco lived for a long time on the island. He took Coco for a long ride on his back, and when the waves were too high and Coco was afraid the monster would open his mouth, and Coco would crawl inside and be brought back safe to the island. One night after a storm, Coco saw something floating on the water, and he jumped on the monster's back and they swam out to it. It proved to be a little girl about Coco's age, who had been on one of the wrecked vessels, and they brought her to the island. At first she was afraid of the monster, but when she learned that he had saved Coco as well as her, and brought them all their food, she became as fond of him as Coco was. "I wish he were a man," she said one day, as she sat on his back with Coco, ready for a sail. Splash went both children into the water, and there in place of the monster was an old man. He caught the children in his arms and brought them to shore. "But what will we do for food now that you're a man?" "We shall want for nothing now," replied the old man. "I am a sea god and can do many things, now that I have my own form again. We will change this island into a beautiful garden, and when the little girl and you are grown up and married, you shall have a castle, and all the sea gods and nymphs will care for you. You will never want for anything again. I will take you out on the ocean on the back of my dolphins." Coco and the little girl lived on the enchanted island, and all the things the old sea god promised came true. Story 3. Mother Turkey and Her Chicks. Mother Turkey believed in the old adage taught to her by her grandmother: "The early bird catches the worm," and every night when the sun set she took her little chicks to the highest branch they could reach, in an old apple tree, and sang them to sleep with a lullaby. "Close your eyes, my little turkey chicks, hide your heads, don't peep. Mother knows the boggy fox's tricks, and she'll watch while you sleep." Mother Turkey had told them about the boggy fox that lived in a hole on the other side of the hill, and it did not need more than the mention of the name to make them obey. "I do wish we could get a good look at him," said one chick as his mother came to the end of the verse. "I should not know him if I met him." "Oh, yes, you would," replied his mother. "He has a very long tail and a sharp nose, and his teeth. Oh, dear me," she exclaimed, as she flapped her wings at the thought of him. "Will you wake us if he comes tonight?" asked another chick. "I shall not need to do that," replied Mother Turkey. "You will hear us talking. He is a very sly fellow, and always very polite and says nice things. But you cover your heads. It is getting late." She began to sing. "Close your eyes, my little turkey chicks, hide your heads, don't peep. Mother knows the boggy fox's tricks, and she'll watch while you sleep." By the time Mother Turkey reached the end of the verse, this time all the chicks were fast asleep. Mother Turkey stretched out her wings once or twice and turned her head in all directions, and then she settled herself for a nap. The moon was shining brightly when she awoke, and she saw not far off what looked like a large black dog watching cautiously toward the tree. Mother Turkey took another look and saw the bushy tail, and she perched herself more firmly on the limb and looked to see if her children were safe from there too, for she knew that the boggy fox had come to take one of her chicks back to his hole if he could. "Good evening, Mr. Fox," she said as the fox came near enough to hear her. "I was sure that I knew your splendid figure. You certainly make a most remarkable picture in the moonlight." Mr. Fox was somewhat taken aback at the compliment paid to him in such a pleasant manner, for usually he was the one to make remarks, and the turkeys listened, not daring to move or speak. He recovered from his surprise by the time he was under the tree and said, "You are most flattering, Mistress Turkey, and I can only return the compliment by telling you that you are a picture yourself in the moonlight, sitting so stately on that limb. But if you would enjoy to the full extent this beautiful evening, you must come from the tree and take a walk over the hill." "No doubt you are right," replied Mrs. Turkey, "but I could not think of leaving my children alone." "I should be very glad to take care of the little dears while you are gone," said Mr. Fox. "And if you will have them come down beside me, I will tell them a story which I am sure will keep them interested until you return." By this time the turkey chicks were awake and listening to what the fox was saying. He seemed so nice and polite that they were quite forgot to be afraid, and when he spoke of telling them a story, one of them said, "Oh, please do go, Mother, and let him tell us a story. Will be very good if you will." "You see, my dear madam," said the fox, "the little dears are quite willing to stay with me. Do go and enjoy the moonlight." Mother Turkey looked at her children in a way that plainly said to them, "Be quiet." And then she said to Mr. Fox, "I appreciate your kind offer, and were my children well, should be very glad to leave with you. But they have been sick and are so lean that I have to be very careful that they sleep and eat well, or they will not be fat by next Thanksgiving, and that would be a disgrace, you know." When the fox heard this, he was not so anxious to have the chicks come down, so he said, "I know just how anxious you must feel, Mrs. Turkey, and if you will come down where I can talk with you without being heard, I will tell you the very thing to give them to make them fat. If he cannot get the chicks, he will take me," thought Mrs. Turkey, "but I am too old of a bird to be caught even by this sly fellow." Mrs. Turkey did not reply to this last remark. She was thinking of a trap she saw her master set the day before. "I wish you would rock around a little so my children can see what a beautiful bushy tail you have. They have never seen so handsome a fellow as you are." Mr. Fox was very proud of his tail, so he walked out from the shade of the tree and strutted about. "Tell him how handsome he is," whispered Mother Turkey to her chicks. "Oh, isn't he handsome?" said one, and another said, "I wish we had such bushy tails instead of the straight feathers." While Mrs. Turkey said, "You are quite the handsomest creature I have ever seen, and I have seen many in my time." By this time, the fox was so pleased with their admiration that he was ready to do anything to display his charms. So when Mrs. Turkey said, "I wish you would run and show them how you can run and jump," he said that he could jump on the to show his nimbleness. "The top of the hogshead would be a good place," said Mrs. Turkey, knowing well that the cask had no head, and that was nearly full of water. Anyway, away ran Mr. Fox, and splash he went into the hogshead. He tried to get out, but it was no use. The cask was too high, and then the farmer, hearing the noise, came out and soon put an end to Mr. Fox. The little turkeys sat wide awake and trembling beside their mother, but when the farmer went into the house, she began to sing, "Close your eyes, my little turkey chicks, hide your heads, don't peep. Mother knows the boggy fox's tricks, and she'll watch while you sleep." And in a few minutes, all was quiet again in the yard. And I think that's where I'll call things for tonight. I hope you enjoyed these stories, and we'll continue on, because there are several more to be read. I hope you have sweet dreams. Bye-bye.